Yeah, so there's no way I pronounce this name right, but I'm gonna try my best. Tighnari is the premier 5-star Dendro character. He uses a bow, and unlike the other Dendro units on the roster currently, he focuses on damage and being the trigger for a lot of reaction damage. He takes bits and pieces from other characters' kits, but the way they're put together makes him pretty dang unique. However, since he will be moving to the standard banner soon after his banner ends, it's possible that you'll get him when you lose future 50/50s, and he may not necessarily be worth pulling for at this very moment. But that's all a matter of perspective. In this video, we're going to be talking about all the things that Tighnari does well and whether or not he's worth pulling from a meta perspective. If you like these types of videos, let me know by liking the video and commenting down below. And with all that being said, my name is Braxophone, and let's talk about Tighnari. First started experimenting with Tighnari's builds and teams, one of the very first things I noticed is that he's not really your conventional main damage dealer. Obviously his focus is putting out high damage numbers, but he doesn't take up much field time. But he also doesn't take up that little field time either. There's a team concept in Genshin called Quick Swap that sort of revolves around you swapping characters for skills and bursts in quick succession, and it's a pretty fun archetype. Typically in Quick Swap, characters aren't sticking around on field for more than 3 to 4 seconds in a worst case scenario, and sometimes it's even less than that. In Tighnari's case, he stays on field for around 5 to 7 seconds, which is an awkward space between a main carry and a quick swap character. This is mostly due to him wanting to use everything in his kit while he's on field, his skill, his burst, and 3 quick charged attacks. If you try to use his charged attacks without incorporating his skill, they're going to charge insanely slow and not be worth the wait at all. So it's not really worth taking the extra time to main him on field unless you have his Constellation 6, which will lower the amount of time it takes to charge his arrows normally. In general though, he feels really easy and rewarding to play. The main issue comes with what kind of playstyles you might personally enjoy. If you don't really like how Sara plays, you probably won't like how Tighnari does. Because he doesn't fit conventionally into either team, his role is pretty unique and makes for some interesting concepts. I'll talk about some of his teammates in the free-to-play friendliness section, but for now, just know that Tighnari is able to be played with multiple other damage dealers at the same time. His role is a little bit strange, but his playstyle, in my opinion, is pretty fun. It just depends on whether or not you like quick swap teams. Because at Constellation 0, he's less focused on being on field all the time. He sort of takes up a little bit of field time, but he's more focused on dealing a quick burst of damage and switching to your other characters. If you choose to build Tighnari, you'll come to realize quickly that his damage alone is not that great. However, due to the new Dendro reactions, his damage ceiling is fairly high, and he can fulfill his role pretty dang well. His elemental skill generates 3 to 4 particles per use, and his burst has a fairly short cooldown of 12 seconds while only costing 40 energy. So most of the time, you're not going to really have any energy issues. His burst deals a solid chunk of damage, so overall his kit does feel pretty dang rewarding. Now, one cool thing about Tighnari is that he gains damage based off of his elemental mastery stat, and with many characters turning to elemental mastery for the new Dendro reactions and Tighnari getting extra damage bonus on his burst from EM, it makes him worth building elemental mastery almost all the time. Attack won't necessarily be bad, but at high adventurers ranks you'll start to see a bigger gap in how high elemental mastery damage is versus attack on Tighnari's stance. Having him running an elemental mastery stance also makes attack buffs more valuable, and because of his on-field time being between 5 to 7 seconds per rotation, you'll find that Sara actually complements him extremely well. The fact that she's Electro and can see huge damage buffs from Aggravate while also giving Tighnari the perfect buff timing makes them a solid pair. But it's not just Sara. You'll actually find that Tighnari with any sort of quicken based comp is pretty dang solid. Though his damage alone is not great, it's very easy to get value out of him by just playing him with the right reactions. Compared to top damage dealers, if you're just looking at characters like Ayaka, Ganyu, and Hu Tao, he's not going to be at that level necessarily, but in the right team setup, he's definitely above average. That said, considering that Sumeru is going to be pushing new enemy and character limitations to try and shift the meta, it's pretty likely that all Dendro characters, including Tighnari, will gain more value just based on the enemies of the region and abyss buffs and debuffs, so he'll feel a lot stronger in Sumeru content than a lot of the older top tier characters. But is he free to play friendly? Well, let's talk about that next. free-to-play friendliness is going to change relative to all of the new Sumeru mechanics. There's tons of new teams and units available, and even new craftable weapons. In a way, with different ways to obtain power being accessible to free-to-play players, the game is more free-to-play friendly than ever. In Tighnari's case, I would argue that he's fairly free-to-play friendly. I don't mean that his 4-star options are on par with 5 stars, or that his constellations are useless, but I do mean that he's fully functional and good with free-to-play setups. His constellations are pretty solid, they all buff him in one way or another, whether that's giving crit rate to his charge attack or lowering his aimed shot charge time. With Tighnari going to the standard banner, you don't really have to worry about getting constellations for him because you're gonna get them over time anyways, and I just think it's amazing that you can lose a 50-50 in the future and get a really good constellation out of it. He also has constellations that give elemental mastery to your team, which we've seen be significantly more useful since the new Dendro reactions released. But once again, none of his constellations are necessary. I've been playing him at C0 and he's been great. One interesting thing about Tighnari is that he actually works pretty well with free-to-play weapons, the main one being Slingshot. Similarly to how 3-star weapons' low base attack can be compensated for with Bennett, Yunjin, Shenhe, and Sara, basically any attack buffers, the Aggravate and Spread reactions also can compensate for low base attack. As a result, due to the crit stat and passive, Slingshot ends up being the best non-5-star weapon aside from R5 Prototype Crescent and R5 Viridescent Hunt. And yes, that even includes the new King Squire bow that gives you elemental mastery. Slingshot is still better. And honestly, refining all of those 4 stars can be a little bit more difficult than Slingshot, so it's just easier to build, and it's definitely more worth it if you have another character that can use it, like Yoimiya as well. So that's something to keep in mind, that Slingshot's a super valuable option for him. In general, he just has a lot of good free-to-play weapons. 5-star weapons are better for Tighnari, with his R1 signature being 30% better than Slingshot, but it's not something you actually need for him at all. Every 5-star bow, including Elegy, beats out Slingshot, but that doesn't mean his damage with Slingshot is bad, and I cannot stress that enough. As for free-to-play friendly teams, because there's so many strong Electro characters, and because Dendro buffed Electro, Tighnari is basically set. He is fairly limited in his usability with Pyro-focused teams, but he works incredibly well with Sara, Fischl, and Kuki, and any current 5-star Electro. The Hydro characters he works with are a bit less free-to-play friendly, as he can't really take advantage of Yelan and Singshal, but characters like Mona and Kokomi can be really good with them. Though he's not the most flexible character in the game, the characters he does work with in the Electro category at least are pretty free-to-play friendly. And of course, as we get more characters in the roster, and as we see more Sumeru characters that are meant to work together, Tighnari will become a lot more free-to-play friendly. So should you pull for Tighnari? Well, let's talk about that. Tighnari is an interesting case for poll decision making because he's the first limited 5-star character to be moving to the standard banner after release, which also means he'll be the only limited 5-star to never get a rerun. What that means is you basically have to roll for him now if you want to guarantee you'll get him ever. That said, Hoyoverse employs a lot of FOMO tactics to try to get players to roll on banners, and I don't really think that you should worry about it as much. The thing is, Tighnari's banner is really great value for newer players since all units on it will be useful, but if you're just not interested in the character, there's even less reason to go for him since you'll eventually get him on a lost 50-50 anyways. He's not a bad character, but if you're not planning on rolling for him just because you really enjoy his design, you might as well just wait. If you're just looking at power rating, Tighnari is actually pretty strong. He brings a lot of value to Electro teams as one of the first Dendro damage dealers, and seeing as we won't get any new Dendro characters in 3.1, he'll be the only Dendro damage dealer for a while, so he's definitely not a bad pickup. With a bunch of cool characters coming out soon, the decision is ultimately up to you. I would argue that if you love Tighnari's design, then it's not really a bad decision to pull for him. But in my opinion, from an outside perspective, I just generally recommend against it. I've been playing Dendro MC and Kale for a little while now, and though none of them are Dendro damage dealers, you can still get a lot of Dendro value out of just playing those 2 units. Imagine pulling for Tighnari because he's cool or you just really like his design now, and then when Sino comes around, you roll for him, you lose the 50-50 and you get another Tighnari. Obviously now that's cool because you have Constellation 1, however, you could have just had another limited character instead. It's not really the worst thing in the world, but in terms of meta and efficiency, I personally don't recommend pulling for him just because of that one simple fact. Nothing to do with his power level, just the idea that he's going to standard in a while after his banner ends. The overall verdict, Tighnari's a great character, but he's not a must pull. Pull for him if you like him, but I personally don't see the value in pulling for a character going to standard unless you want to make sure that you do not miss them. And if you don't want to miss them and you end up pulling, I hope you enjoy playing Tighnari. He's pretty dang fun. Hey, I know a lot of you think you're subscribed already, but if you just so happen to not be subscribed, and you should check right now, consider subscribing to the channel. It only takes a couple seconds, and it lets you know when I upload new videos, and it really helps me out. Make sure to like the video if you've enjoyed, and come check out the Twitch. I might even be live right now as you're watching this video. Who knows? I'll catch you guys next time.